we chose to come here often with a contract, which is often editable, not always, but we come here for a reason, and it could be to work on something. Like if we have a tendency to get angry easily, it could be to like have situations that challenge us and to help us practice like being a lot more calm and practicing wisdom or other things, or if we have a lot of insecurity about something else, or we could be here primarily to help a family member or a friend.
Welcome to Light True Horror Podcast. Our guest today is Ned Matinnia. He is the creator of the largest NDE group on Facebook with over 250,000 members. How are we doing, Ned?
I'm good.
Can you tell me what life was like before you got into NDEs?
I had a hard time, especially in my childhood. I was kind of a black sheep in my family, but also in my school, and I felt like on Earth, like I felt like an alien. Like, why am I here? Because I had a painful childhood, and because of that, I had an abusive father and a lot of mental abuse. Some physical abuse. However, the mental, imprinted on me. So how I acted around other children, it was almost like a bully magnet, and then it compounded because I didn't have any self-esteem. And so as a teenager, without any real friends or close family, that actually is a healthy role model to like help me heal, I thought about suicide. I'm like, well, what's the point of this? This is a really painful existence. And then I looked on the news and I saw how people treated each other. I saw how the wealthy and powerful, if they commit crimes, will often get off free. I saw injustice in the world, and I saw wars, and I felt like humanity was just kind of hopeless. And so I did think about, well, what's the point of being here? Like, I don't want to be here. I don't, and I was a scientist at heart. I'm still a scientist at heart, but I'm open-minded, as opposed to like a debunker who is completely firmly on a position. I'm more open to evidence, and that's how I got into NDEs. And so, because in high school, in my biology class, I learned about evolution, and I saw there is a good evidence for it. So I basically thought that explained everything, and I thought, therefore, there is no purpose, there is no afterlife, and so if I kill myself, there is no ultimate consequence, and it was, perhaps the best option. And before I went seriously on that path, I kind of was like, well, I'm curious, to learn, if there's any actual, higher authority or purpose. And so in college, one of my electives was world religions. I learned about Eastern religions, and then Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, and all that, and seeing if there was any common information, which there, ultimately all of them, they talk about love and how there is this higher God, which is often nameless and often a mystery. You can't box it in. And so I thought that was interesting, but I didn't think that was a good enough explanation until I came across Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, which was the first main classic in 1975. And that's when I started actually thinking like, perhaps uh, perhaps there is more, and perhaps these patients and people who have these experiences, it doesn't appear to be, making it up for sensationalism, or doesn't appear to be hype. It seems like these are real people, and the message is that our life here is important. And if, things like taking one's life isn't ultimately a wise choice. And so I took that to heart. So that kind of started changing me around and changing my whole worldview and perspective, that, like my Facebook profile, I put a saying up there. It just says that I'm a truth seeker about life and beyond. And what does the evidence show? Kindness matters. And that's ultimately, like, if you boil down when people have the near-death experience and the life review, and they see how all of our words and actions and energy towards others, we will ultimately feel that, and we're all ultimately one. And then it makes sense that we're here to help each other, and that's actually how we can actually have a happy earth rather than an always, painful, warring earth. So that's kind of like my overall journey in a nutshell, as I started into NDEs.
What is your findings on some religions would say suicide with suicide you go to hell. NDEs, what have you learned what happens then?
I've learned that as much as experiencers will often have shared how beautiful and amazing and it is, outside of Earth in this other dimensions, and they often will argue to stay there, not have to come back here. But even with how enticing it is, and I've heard a few of them actually in private, they say that if there's a funeral, they get a little jealous, but they can't tell anyone because no one would understand what they're talking about. Having said that, they all know that they're here for like an assignment, like a reason. And so it's almost like we're in a school and we're in a classroom, and class isn't always fun, but it has a purpose. And so, I've heard experiencers, they say this is like our university or a boot camp or a gym, and you have to lift the weights. And as you do that, we grow on a soul level. So your question about suicide from an NDE perspective is that it's never encouraged because we come here for a reason. And as painful as it is, it's precious because we don't have these kind of experiences or contrasts in spirit.
Would you agree to say that if you were to commit suicide, you would have to come back and complete your mission?
So I think that everyone is on a unique journey, but I've heard that a lot in terms of oftentimes on a soul level, we chose to come here often with a contract, which is often editable, not always, but we come here for a reason, and it could be to work on something. Like if we have a tendency to get angry easily, it could be to like have situations that challenge us and to help us practice like being a lot more calm and practicing wisdom or other things. Or if we have a lot of insecurity about something else, or we could be here primarily to help a family member or a friend. So many intricate soul connections and plans, and it's amazing because in our daily life, like it's like an iceberg. We only see surface of what's happening, but under the hood, if we understood all of the dynamics and how important everything is, it's amazing. And I heard from experiencers that when we're on the other side, we can often see those. And it's like you're looking at the whole tapestry and it all makes sense, where here it's confusing. I think that, because we're all on different journeys, some people, let's say if you have a terminal illness, or if you are so handicapped you can't actually survive. In my opinion, like I think for assisted suicide for people who really don't have any other option, my perspective is that it's probably okay. It's what I do know from experiencers is that God or the universe, it knows us, and so all of our tribulations it understands. And so if you're in a situation where just like you've tried everything and you're suffering, if a person ended it, they would have nothing but understanding and compassion. Like you were in a hard place. It's hard. So although having said that, it's never encouraged. And the suffering here, I've heard, often has value. If for nothing else, it breaks us out of our ego. Like our ego is the one that wants to have our own control. Like, well, I think I should be a billionaire and do this. And if I try that and I keep running it into walls, it's because my ego isn't acting in alignment with my actual purpose or with other people's purposes. So in suffering, it's almost like our free will is kind of temporarily taken away, and we are forced or confronted into a situation or a pain. And in that pain is when we can kind of surrender and say, okay, is there a God? Help me. Like, it's kind of getting us out of our own tight control on everything. And in that, it often opens up our hearts too.
Did you come into mediumship before or after Ions?
It was around the same time. And so it was actually, the year was 2012. And at that time, I think it was in April, it was on Facebook, and I saw an advertisement, and it was for mediums in my area. And so I was in Denver at the time, and I clicked on it just out of curiosity, because the scientist in me didn't have any like belief or no belief. It was a curiosity. Like, I wonder if these are actually real. Like, I want to actually experience it in person and analyze it, and kind of see what conclusions I could make about it. And so in that, my grandfather, my mom's father, who passed away when I was little, he came through. And even though I completely had forgotten about him, he hadn't forgotten about me. And he mentioned some memories and things that I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, I went fishing with him, and I caught this a circular flounder or something, and he mentioned that, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, I can't believe the details and memories. But also, he said how, especially when I was having the hard time as a teenager, that even though I didn't know it, he was guiding me and kind of protecting me. And so in that, it was a light bulb of like, wow, this is. So I learned about near-death experiences, and then because I know that they are real, and people are conscious outside of their physical body, it kind of it opens up this whole worldview, which I didn't have as an atheist. And then it was in August of that year, I saw an advertisement online about the IONS conference, and it was in Scottsdale, Arizona, over Labor Day weekend. And I immediately signed up, because I was like, wow, IONS, is all about near-death experiences. And at that point, I've only read about them in books and seen them on YouTube, but it was like actually meeting the people in person was exciting. And so, and then I went there, and it was a whole, it was amazing. And it's always amazing, because it's not just an intellectual conference of just like learning dry facts or information. It's meeting people who have been changed or overcome so much, or were, had so much interesting life situations. And if you ever feel like, your life is hopeless or horrible, as I did, you see people, a lot of people, they went all the way down at the bottom, and then had a completely rebirth, and everything completely changed. And it's almost like that whole caterpillar to butterfly, and a lot of the experiencers can relate to that. And so it was 2012 when all that happened. And so I always, I study mediums and mediumship, and I became one. And ultimately, we all can do this, because we all have intuition, because we're all spiritual beings at the core. Um, and so I study mediumship and near-death experiences, and oftentimes when I post or write about topics, I will show how both of them are kind of helping each other, or reinforcing the message. Because if something is true, it should be true from all angles. And so from a near-death experiencer who becomes a medium, which is actually common, you can have like a person who's an atheist, or who's a religious person who was taught that mediumship is evil, and then they have a near-death experience, and then they become a medium, and they're like, yeah, it's just so natural. I saw, a woman, in spirit. I met her, and she told me to tell her mom this particular message. And then, a week after that, she actually ran into the person who she was told about, and she told her about her daughter, and everything fit. And so it's just amazing how near-death experiences and mediums go hand in hand.
What would you say to skeptics on
I would
mediumship?
say, well, one thing I've learned, and I think a lot of experiencers learn this, is you really have to let people learn in their own time. And so all that I can do is offer information. And it's almost like, leading a horse to water. It's up to them if they're interested. If not, say, okay, it's just not for you right now. And kind of moving on. And so in the past, I would sometimes argue or debate, and I still sometimes will do it like online or in person if there's a chance of an opening. However, some people will just basically, you can tell that they're not open and they just keep repeating the same misinformation, and you counter, well, all that was actually debunked. And I have a friend who her experience, contradicts that. And if they're not going to listen, you say, well, okay, believe what you want.
Good answer. How did you get on the board uh, of directors on Ions?
So at that time, it was 2016, and I was at the conference in Orlando. And I think I remember in the hotel, because I was helping out with the equipment, all the microphones and speakers. And then they had a conversation about needing more help. And I think I volunteered. I was like, yeah, I can help as a, I'm a software engineer by day job. And so, if I can help out with my particular skills or perspective. And so at that time, there was an opening, and they asked if I was interested. And I said, sure. And so a lot of the leadership is on the East Coast. And so ION's headquarters is in Durham, near Raleigh, in North Carolina. And so at that time I lived in Colorado. It was a 2-hour time difference. And so we often had meetings of like, planning for the conference or for local groups. And that time difference wasn't as bad. And then I moved to California because with my work schedule and with their schedule, it was hard to keep it up. And so after 2 years, I resigned. But who knows, that might help in the future. My passion is just to help get the information out and support out. So like the conferences are like family reunions. And so because near-death experiences are such heart openers and intuition openers, there's a lot of hugs. There's a lot of like, I see, like if you're walking in the hall and you see another person, and even though you may not have ever met them in your whole life, you're like, I wonder if we had a soul connection in a past life. And it's just a lot of like people finally feeling heard and seen by others, as opposed to out in the world. So many people are just not interested in near-death experiences, or they have their own judgments of them.
They dismiss them pretty easily, pretty fast, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Facebook group. How did that come about?
My first conference in Scottsdale in 2012, I went home and I think I 1 year later, it was in September of 2013, and I thought about like, all the articles I read and the YouTubes I watched about experiencers. I wanted a place to like just post them, organize them. And so and that time it's interesting how it was so new because there wasn't anything out there about near-death experiences. And so I created a group and I called it Near-Death Experiences. And it was just only me. And I posted articles as I found them. And then just over time, a lot of people, they started finding it and joining. And it kind of transitioned from like me just sharing, articles and everything into like a lot of people asking questions and experiencers actually posting about their experience. And so it became more about actually diplomatically handling a large group of people to ensure that everyone is happy, because you have experiencers, you have non-experiencers, you have atheists, you have religious people, you have so much diversity of opinions, and it's ensuring that the message of the experience is honored and treated sacredly. And I have rules, just like any group, and one of them is kindness. And of course, it's sometimes impossible to enforce everyone, especially on this scale. We just hit 252,000 members, and I have a team of I think 6 others moderators. But even then, I tend to do most of the approving and disapproving, and if there's arguments, handling them. So it's more about keeping the vibe healthy and positive and healing. And I could have made it a private group, to honor the privacy of everyone. And there are many private groups out there, which I'm a part of as well. But I made it intentionally public for a reason, because I feel the world has to learn about these. And so we need to have this interface of like, here's the experiencers, here's everyone else, and let's actually help them integrate. And so a lot of religious people will ask about hell or divorce or all the questions, and the experiencers get to explain that it isn't about what they've been taught through their human beliefs. Always, there are some parallels in religions, especially the golden rule, but other than that, the message is for everyone of all backgrounds.
I have to personally thank you, because a lot of these groups, all groups have rules. A lot of them have no self promotion. I believe yours does too. But I was allowed to post my book, which launched it to a #1 new release, and then got the message to the people who resonate with that message. So I have to say thank you for that, because a lot of other groups wouldn't give it the chance to even be seen.
That's awesome. Speaking of that, it's been a fine line, because I've had people who tell me, that I shouldn't allow any books or things like that. But I feel like the intention I created the group for, and I prayed about it even early on, was, I prayed, like, I want this to help the world. So, like, if anything that can help the world, like your book and other people's, and and it's directly on topic about NDEs. It isn't just a general inspirational quote or something, but it does reference them directly. Then yeah, it's encouraged. Spam or people who are just endlessly self promoting isn't welcome. But if someone has a valid book or event or thing, and it can help the world and help get this information out, it's encouraged in the group.
Well, thank you. A few clicks goes a long way. A long ways. The energy goes really far. You're on this podcast because that book was allowed into your group, which created this platform. And so it's like a domino effect. Your ripple is rippling, and you get to see it personally. And I think that's pretty cool.
Me too. So tell me quickly about your book. And so is it a children's book?
It's a children's book, and it's basically the soul's journey. And I took stuff that I learned from NDEs and stuff from Journey of Souls. Just kind of put this in the book. It just goes basically, it has a soul contract implemented in it. It has, you were a soul before Earth. You chose your soul contract. You choose everything, and then you came here and you forgot. And it goes why you forgot, so you can learn and grow. And then as out of body experience, and then being greeted by light. I'll send you one as a gift. And one of my favorite part is after they get greeted by a soul, they go through their life review, and you felt everything that you did from everyone else's perspective, and then it lets you know that you're not judged, you're not going to hell, and and then that's pretty much it. So it's based on the journey of soul, and I would say it's based around reincarnation, if that's how you want to interpret it. Really, it doesn't it's up for interpretation. It doesn't mention God or Jesus or any names specific. Just kind of leaves that up to the parents, I suppose.
Well, speaking of that life review, it reminded me of have you heard of Dr. Mary Neal and her
Yes,
NDE?
she had
And
the kayak.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and have you heard her explain in some of her talks? She said, like, in her life review, she said 34 times removed. So with that, so that's like, it's hard for our human minds to understand. And she said too, like, when you're outside of your body, you probably heard this. It's easier to understand because you're like smarter than we are now. But she's like, I saw, like, it wasn't just I impacted Bob and Bob impacted Sarah. It was like, if you do that chain 34 times of everything, it's just like immense of how interconnected we all are. And so perhaps that's kind of inspiration.
Every action, I would say, keeps going. I mean, energy doesn't die, neither do your actions, because whatever you did here continues, and it doesn't stop. And I think if we could keep that in mind and become self-aware of that, the world would be a better place.
For sure.
Do you have a favorite NDE story?
It's a good question. I appreciate a lot of them. I really liked. Well, it's hard to only have one. However, I'll say David Bennett, and he has actually talked at Lions conferences, and he has a YouTube channel and all that. And he was a commercial diver who in 1983 he was off the coast of Ventura, California, near Los Angeles. And in a storm, he drowned in the ocean. And as an engineer, who's kind of a bold personality, he wasn't spiritual or anything at that time. When he drowned in the ocean, he left his body and he met his soul family, who he was almost like, these beings or people, I felt like it was the long lost family I never had. Even with his biological family on Earth, it's almost like these beings felt so much more loving and familiar. And so he met them. He had a conversation with them and everything. And then the light or God, told him that it wasn't his time yet and that he had to return because he had a purpose. And it's interesting because he said that the light repeated that a few times, that you have a purpose, because he argued with it. And so, and then eventually, against his will, he was sent back, and miraculously his body in the ocean, I think his arm wrapped around a bowline in the water, and then the waves started, when they hit his chest, it started expelling the water, and then his crewmates found him, and eventually he was rescued. And he talks about how afterwards, when he looked at anything like the palm trees or the people, he saw auras around them, and he saw energy. And as an engineer who never believed in any of this stuff, it tripped him out. But it was, and a lot of experiencers have similar phenomenon afterwards. But it's my favorite because of how he changed, and how it completely, like, he used to sometimes judge certain people or groups, and I think all of us do at times. And it was a reminder for him to, he learned AT&T: acceptance, tolerance, and truth. And so accepting everyone exactly as they are, like, even it could be a dirty homeless person, it could be a politician that everyone hates, it could be anyone, but accepting everyone as they are, not that to condone bad behavior or anything, but to understand that we're all connected, and just compassion became his way of life afterwards. And he wrote a book that I recommend if anyone is curious. It's called Voyage of Purpose. And it's not too long. However, it's very thoughtful. And I appreciate his take on how he explained everything.
I'll have to check that out. Let me ask you a few questions that I ask everyone. What is your definition of the meaning of life?
So everything that I have learned from NDEs and elsewhere is that we are basically here to be the best versions of ourselves. And it's not like I used to think that we had to be perfect and always like upright and always, not make mistakes or have fun or appreciate, our senses and things. It's all of that, but in a responsible way, and ultimately to help each other. And so a definition of the meaning of life wouldn't be complete if it didn't include in some way enjoying life, being the best we can, and supporting each other. because right now in the world, so much of the problems are because people or countries are focused only on a self and screw everyone else. But that ultimately, if we're all one, that ends up, it's causing division and just needless pain.
An eye for eye leaves the whole world blind. If you had one last message to the world, what would it be?
And so sometimes a lot of people ask in the group, if any experiencers, if they saw, are we in end times or are we in Armageddon or things like this? And a lot of experiencers, for one, sometimes see different potential futures and outcomes. And so rather than thinking, well, are we just going to, are we doomed? Are we going to destroy each other? Or who's the enemy? Who's a good person? It's to transcend all of that and remember what the near-death experiencers are teaching us, which is love everyone across borders, across boundaries, across religions or genders or all of that. Like, we're all in this together. And the more we focus on unity, the happier outcome we have.
Beautiful. Where can people find you?
So on Facebook, if you type in groups and type in near-death experiences, you'll find it, and it has the space background of the cosmos, and it's also the URL is just facebook.com/groups/return from death, one word. And I'm on Facebook, and I'm actually writing a book. It's not out yet, and eventually I probably will have a website, but I would say primarily Facebook for now. I'm on there.
Awesome. I want to thank you for everything you do and for being on the show today and giving it an opportunity and sharing what you have to share.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm honored that I'm your second episode.
I appreciate that. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on the Light You Are podcast. If you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you never miss an episode. Also, if you haven't checked out my children's book, The Light You Are, it's available only on Amazon. We're all just trying to remember who we are, the light we are.